Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacey Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths. These badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacey's obsession. This podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.
Welcome back to Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time, where we focus on facts and artifacts to reveal how digital investigations really unfold. I'm your host, Stacey Eldridge, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Becky Passmore. Now, today, we're leaving the United States and we're headed to Australia to talk about mushrooms. Becky, what case are we going to talk about tonight?
I wish we were really going to Australia.
Right, next time.
So this is an odd situation. A family lunch in rural Australia that turned deadly, followed by an investigation into what really happened, an arrest, and a 9-week trial. 9 weeks. As digital forensic experts, we are especially interested in how investigators used online activity, phone data, and digital artifacts to make their cases. So today, we're going to jump in and start talking about the Erin Patterson case, the mushroom murders from a small town outside Melbourne, Australia.
Yep. And this timing of this episode might be good with all of the holiday family events coming up. Beware of what you eat at those family gatherings, right, Becky?
Know who's preparing your food and what they're preparing it with.
Right. So, but in all seriousness, this case begins back on Saturday, July 29th, 2023. Erin Patterson hosted a lunch at her home, and I'm going to butcher all of these names from down under.
Yes.
My apologies to the Australians who are now listening to us, right?
That's right.
So, Leongatha, Victoria. It is 2 hours southeast of Melbourne. I may have driven through this area or somewhat near to that town this one time when I drove with a couple of friends from Melbourne to from Sydney. We thought that would be a great little road trip, so we did that. But anyways, I digress. Her guests were her estranged husband's mother and father, and aunt and uncle. Her estranged husband declined the invite. On the menu was beef Wellingtons, little individual ones, which I had for the appetizers at my wedding. And I was not trying to poison anybody there, but we did have individual little beef Wellingtons. Again, I digress. So later that night, everyone except Erin became violently ill. In the courtroom, they go into great details about all the symptoms and the nasty things that were happening with the bodily fluids. We will not be doing that on this podcast.
We won't.
We'll spare you that. That's not digital evidence. We're not concerned with that.
Not the bodily
But
functions.
anyways, within days, 3 of the guests died from suspected death cap mushroom poisoning. Erin herself went to the hospital 2 days later, whereas the guests went to the hospital the very next day. And that timing was certainly some focus of attention from investigators and prosecutors.
Interesting. And from there, the investigation focused on where the mushrooms came from. So Erin told the Department of Health and the police that she bought some from an Asian grocery store and some from a local supermarket. But that explanation eventually raised doubts. The health authorities couldn't find any evidence those stores sold death caps. That led police to look at her digital footprint, what she'd been searching for, what her pictures were, and who she'd been communicating before and after the lunch?
The police dug the leftovers out of the trash, and those leftovers did test positive for the toxins that are found in death cap mushrooms. And basically, this is one of the deadliest mushrooms in the world. No surprise that it's found in Australia, because if you're not familiar with Australia, basically there's a lot of stuff there everywhere that can easily kill you. There's lots of songs about it. My favorite song about it is called Deadly Animals by Scared Weird Little Guys. Give the song a listen if you want. It's kind of a catchy tune. Like I said, lots of songs. I'm unsure if any of them actually mention death cap mushrooms, but maybe that is a new song now coming after this trial. And another fun fact from this trial in Australia, the jurors got to use iPads. So I guess they're getting like digital versions of everything to kind of swipe and search through instead of like big paper binders.
Well, day 2 of the trial is where we first get to some of the digital evidence, and the text messages between Simon and Erin about the lunch were read in court.
Ooh, and I should interject. Simon is the estranged husband.
Okay.
That makes it make more sense now.
Right. And Simon said he was uncomfortable coming and they discussed things related to her health and all other things later. And Erin texted back that it was disappointing and comments on how much effort she had put into and making the dinner and may not be able to do it again. Simon never replied, nor did he attend that deadly lunch, excuse me.
Jumping ahead to day 4 of the trial, we get to some Facebook evidence, kind of. The people that she was in this Facebook group, it was like a true crime Facebook group, provided some testimony about her group posts. And the group was really nothing about true crime. I guess that's how it started, but then they just kind of stayed there and hung out and talked about whatever they wanted. And 2 of the witnesses described Erin posting in the group about her purchase of a dehydrator and how she was using it to dry mushrooms and put them in food. And she was even talking about hiding mushrooms ground up in the brownies for the kids. And they also detailed Erin asking the group about how to make beef Wellington in the weeks before the lunch. And also, she was complaining about how hard it was to find the appropriate cut of meat for those little mini beef Wellingtons.
Interesting. So now we get to the 4th week of the trial. And on May 18th and 19th, telecommunications expert Dr. Matthew Sorrell starts off by describing how mobile phones and cellular networks work. He then discussed cellular records provided by Erin's cellular provider. Mr. Sorrell told the court that the records from a phone registered to Erin Patterson showed the handset and connected consistently to a Lock South Base Station for about 43 minutes on the morning of May the 22nd, 2023. This was suggesting she remained in and around the township. So later that morning, Miss Patterson's phone hooked into the Outram base station almost exclusively for 25 minutes. Witnesses in the trial told the court they observed death cap mushrooms growing near both of these locations around the state.
So, from what I've read, this was a very technical testimony, and there were certainly comments to that degree from the reporters and other people in attendance as they took to the blogs and filed their reports afterwards. So we're going to get into the weeds a bit here because that's what we do. But Dr. Searle sets the stage by talking about base stations. So talks about all that techie goodness and what they do and how it works. And then he spends a lot of time talking about the differences between passing through a base station and staying at that location. And he also discussed how a person does not have to be actively using their phone, like touching it, interacting it, because there's all of these numerous background tasks that are always going on that require data. So think checking your email, the iMessages coming in, things like that. That's happening without you having to do anything. He also discussed the handovers or handoffs between base stations as you travel, especially like when you're in a car, you're moving much faster, right? And so at one point, the judge interrupted and asked if going through all of these examples was really necessary. So we're talking about how much they were going through and explaining here. It was so much so that the judge was like, hey, do we need this? And so let's kind of go through some of the facts that they talked about on the stand. They're talking about how Erin's phone was pinging in Outram on May 22nd. And he said, as part of their analysis, they looked at the occasions when her phone stayed in one area for prolonged periods of times versus the other occasions where it just appeared to be passing by. Lots of tables were shown in the court. One of them was documenting the events on May 22nd, 2023, and it shows SMS and data activity from 10:30 a.m. to 12:55 p.m. that day. The cell phone starts at Leongatha, however you say it, the hometown of Erin, before shifting to Outram at 11:18 a.m. Now, connections to Kunwara and Cardella take place at 11:21 a.m. and then Outram at 11:31 a.m. before connecting back to her home base station at 12:03 p.m. It's important to note that her phone is stationary near Outram for about 25 minutes. And so Dr. Sorrell really starts drilling down into that hour between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. on that day in question, so May 22nd. In that short period, it appears that her phone has made more base station connections. And so she's going through numerous base stations. So clearly she's traveling most likely in a moving vehicle, right? So her hometown one, the Outram, Kunwara, Cardella, and Mirbu North. These are fun places to say.
It sounds like it.
And as Dr. Sorrell said earlier, these phones are greedy. He was telling the jury all about this. And so they're often going to go searching for the best possible base station with the strongest signal. And he talks about like all the geographic things and the things that can make like one base station not preferred, even though like it might appear to be closer. So it's not so simple as draw a straight line and that's the base station you're going to connect to. But so the phone is always looking for the best possible base station that's giving them the strongest signal.
Right.
Now, he also is, as he's continuing to drill into that 11 a.m. to noon time frame, he really drills down into a window between 11:24 a.m. and 11:49 a.m. where that phone is constantly connected to that Outram base station. And then apart from that, it did hook into a new station at Foster North for just a few minutes. And so his testimony was that it indicates that at that point, that phone was relatively stationary.
Yeah, so then the prosecution claims that Dr. Tom May made an online posting about death cap mushrooms in Outram on May the 21st, the day before Erin Patterson's phone allegedly made this possible visit to the same area. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so according to this evidence, Miss Patterson's phone has connected to a base station that appears very close to where these mushrooms were allegedly growing. It is possible there was a visit to Nielsen Street at that time, states Dr. Sorrell of Miss Patterson's movements on May 22nd, 2023. So the attention now shifts to a potential trip Miss Patterson made to Locke on April 28th, 2023. This is 10 days from a witness from earlier in the day where she testified that she spotted death caps in that area. A chart on the screen shows Miss Patterson's phone connected to the Korumburra base station at 8:59 a.m. before a new connection to a cell phone tower at Locke at 9:08 a.m. The device then hooks into a tower at Locke South and returns to the Locke Tower at 10:02 a.m. Dr. Sorrell qualifies this as not a guarantee that the phone remained in the locked township for that entire period. So then phone records show a second trip to Locke. The court is shown another detailed chart, and this is a possible return trip from Leongatha to Locke on May 22nd, 2023. The records show Miss Patterson's phone connected consistently to a Locke South tower from about 9:18 to about 10:01. This points to the phone being in or close to the Locke Township. And Dr. Sorrell says it can't be moving very far. So the second trip to Locke on May the 22nd is the same day as the visiting to Outram, and this was before that visit to Outram. So we're not exactly familiar with all these towns in Australia. In fact, we can't even properly pronounce the towns.
Yeah, again, our apologies.
Exactly. But the point Dr. Sorrell is trying to make is Erin first went to Locke on April 28th. Then she returned to Locke the morning of May the 2nd.
Oh, May 20th, bad.
Then she returned to Locke the morning of May 22nd. After visiting Locke, she headed over to Outram. The inference being this is important because Outram and Locke both had posts about death cap mushrooms being present. Furthermore, these visits may have one wondering if Erin went to Locke on April 28th and may or may not have found the death cap mushrooms, then returned on May the 22nd and possibly found none that she tried to look for some at the second location in Outram. Keep it in mind, death cap mushrooms were reported being spotted just the day before on May the 20th.
And on the cross-examination, the defense attacks the usefulness of these phone records as evidence. The defense attacks the reliability, and they talk about how inclement weather can impact reception. This has happened to me, and I'm not even talking about cell phone tower stuff. The defense does get Dr. Sorrell to agree that phones connecting to the Outram base station could also be in two other towns. I guess they're close enough to hit that base station as well. The defense continues to focus on the Outram visit and has Dr. Sorrell share that initial call records didn't indicate that visit to the Outram base station initially, but later he received event-based monitoring records. Now, these event-based monitoring records are going to be generated when your phone does a task that requires data, again, such as checking that email. But so anyways, once he got those event-based monitoring records, that's when he was able to determine this location of Outram in this time frame on May 22nd. The defense went on to highlight that Erin's phone connected to two other base stations, one that was 36 kilometers away and another that was 38 kilometers away. And these were on either side of the Outram event. You know, it was like 36 kilometers away for one Outram, and then to another one that was maybe 38 kilometers away, or, flipped it. But so there's some movement happening with the location of the cell phone. Now, Dr. Sorrell conceded that the phone may have never been in Outram. The defense launches a similar attack on the connections to the Locke base station as well. Now, I read lots of commentary from the reporter about Dr. Sorrell showing lots of maps, and he was like, oh boy, we got more testimony coming up from Dr. Sorrell. So not sure, I don't have the timing, but it seems like he may have been on the stand for a minute or two.
Right. And you never know how long you're going to be there, right? So
yeah, you think it's going to be, I'm going to be in and out, an hour, a half a day or whatever, and then you're 2 days coming back the next day sort of situation.
That's right. And he probably had to do with that in this case. So on May the 20th, we get to some more digital evidence. We're talking about computers, cell phones, and tablets. The police had seized several computers and mobile phones from Erin Patterson's home as part of the investigation. The digital evidence was examined using forensic software tools, including Axiom and Celebrite. The desktop computer contained 3 solid-state drives, specifically 120 gigs twice, and then 256 gig SSDs. So the records show that one of the computers in her house had accessed the website iNaturalist.com approximately 14 months before the deaths. The user had visited specific pages showing sightings of death cap mushrooms around the Melbourne area. Now remember, Erin lives around the Melbourne area as well. The search engine used to find the iNaturalist was Bing.com. The court heard that on May 28, 2022, a visit was made to the iNaturalist website used by citizen scientists for observations of flora and fauna. The title of one of the visited pages included words, death cap from Melbourne, Vic, Australia on May 18, 2022. Another search conducted on May 28, 2022 was for the Corumba pub venue not far from Erin's home.
And so here's where it gets interesting, in my opinion. I could find no evidence in the testimony that was accessible to me stating that there were any website visits made in April or May of 2023. Remember, these websites that we just talked about and their visits was a year prior to that. So in May of 2022. That in the notes of the trial that I've been reading, they keep talking about these posts to the iNaturalist website that were made in April and May of 2023. Now, the prosecution did have witnesses testify that they made those posts. And so, the question is, how did they track down these witnesses that were making these posts? And they have one of the investigators later testify that he basically took some of these URLs of websites visited from this old internet history, plugged them into the computer he was currently using, connected to the internet to see what was going on like a year later in 2023. So that's how they kind of tracked all of that stuff down. And we'll kind of dive into some more of that later. But that's where it was coming from. And during the testimony, as they're getting into the digital forensics part of the case, the witness for the prosecution presented a PowerPoint slide deck that began with some very basic digital concepts. The first slide asked, "What is a computer?" Now, many courtroom observers repeatedly thought, well, we're in for a long day. And the judge also asked a series of foundational questions, including questions like, what is software? And the examiner also introduced concepts such as, what is a file? What is a folder? Then the discussion eventually turned to file system metadata. They specifically went into created, modified, and last access days. And the forensic expert compared the properties tab that you can see in Windows as kind of the place where you can gather all of this metadata at, to kind of give people an analogy of what these sorts of metadata things are and what they can contain. Now, he did say that the last access date represents the time someone last tried to open a file. So now we have to pause here and have some discussion about the digital forensics testimony getting kicked off. So the first thing I want to talk about is, do we have to go this basic? Like, what is a computer? What is a file? Because this reminds me of like my first testimony, which was like way back in 2005. I guess it was like 2006, I think, the first testimony. So like 20 plus years ago. And we thought this was sort of foundational back then, but like now it's 20 years later. Do we still have to go that basic? What do you think, Becky?
Well, I mean, I can understand when we had to do that way back 20 years ago when we were testifying and get down into the very basics of what is a file, what is a folder, what is a computer, how do they work, right? Because back 20 plus years ago, people really didn't understand it, right? They didn't have the computer, which is the phone, in their pocket every day. Many times people have the computer that's the phone in their pocket every day and they don't know how to use it and they don't know how it works.
Well, they just use it. They don't know what the things are called, right?
Correct, right. So unless Australia does not use computers on a regular basis, I don't.
I mean, they do have the Outback,
I know.
so
I know.
maybe not a lot of computers in the Outback. I
I
don't know.
know. So I'm feeling like they should. I mean, but maybe they understand their jurors more. Maybe they want to be very specific. Maybe they want people to understand we are talking about a computer. We're not talking about a cell phone, right?
True.
Because we are so used to using our cell phones. Maybe the strategy that the attorneys are using is we are very specifically talking about hard drives, SSD drives, computers, not your daily use of mobile devices.
Hmm. And the commentary also was, he covered a lot of this very basic foundational tech talk very quickly. So it wasn't like he droned on and on and on. It sounds like it was pretty quick definitions. But basically, that what was happening up front, it was sort of a data dump of terms all at the beginning. So it's just, spitfire, like what is a computer? What is a file? What is software? So another thing to consider is this data dump, like give all the dictionary definitions. Is that a great concept to just dump it out all here at the very beginning? Or is it better to sprinkle it in as along as you go? I
Right.
don't know. How do you like to do it, Becky? Do you have a preference?
If I'm the one on the stand, I want to talk about it when it becomes relevant in the conversation. I don't want to describe all these things up front. And then
Right.
as we get to the middle of the testimony, I'm either having to describe them again or
True.
I'm passing them on like, well, it's referenced, 2 hours ago when I was telling you what a computer and what a file and what a folder and what all these things are. So I would say in my mind, it makes more sense to talk about it as we get to it.
Yeah, that's how I like to do it too. And I mean, some of these testimonies these days, you can be on a stand talking for stuff like 2 days and then just on your side and then the cross. So, I mean, you can be up there for days. And so if you dump everything at the beginning, to your point, you might be reiterating it again 2 days later because, if they're not familiar with these concepts, how are they going to remember them from 2 days ago anyway? Now, I'm sure since there was a PowerPoint presentation, I assume it was an exhibit. And then so the jurors were going to get a copy of that. So maybe that was the purpose of that. The only way they could give them these definitions to reference later was just to dump it all out in the beginning because otherwise, if it is an exhibit, then you got to go through all that hemming and hawing of it. Now put this back up in the screen and okay, now stop showing it. And, I don't know. And Australia is a different country.
It
I
is.
imagine their rules different
It is.
a little bit from ours. So maybe that's just how they do it. And that's their tradition. That's just how they do it. We're not saying it's right or wrong.
No.
We're just talking about it from a different perspective of what we like. And we happen to be very similar. You might like something else and that's fine too. I mean, you're the person on the stand. You got to do it in a way that makes you comfortable so you can talk through it all.
That's right. Not like a robot.
A file is a folder is a See, that's my concern with like just dump it all out at the beginning. You might sound like all engaged in interjection, but when you get to like page 4 of definitions, robot mode
Right.
might be engaged.
Yes, exactly.
Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the mentioning of the last access dates. And he said a last access date is the date a file was last open. So let's talk about how accurate or inaccurate that can be. And there was no mention of the operating system on here. So I don't know if it was XP. I don't know, 7, 10, 11. There's lots of things to choose from. It was a tower. It was a specific brand. So I do know it was Windows based and obviously Bing as a search engine clearly,
Sure.
Microsoft Edge with the
Yeah.
default search engine of Bing was in use here.
And this was within the last couple of years too.
Right, right.
So it's not like we're talking about a case that was adjudicated and went to trial in, 20 years ago.
Right, right.
So
As we do.
I know, as we do.
We like to get old or do old things.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. That is always always a very delicate topic to discuss in the first place because you want to make sure that you are articulating accurately about the modified access created dates on a computer or in this situation opening a file.
Right. And I mean, way back when, I mean, that used to be a pretty reliable indicator, but we're talking like XP
Yeah.
time frame. It was somewhat reliable, but then like believe it was Vista rolled out, and then it had by default the updating of the last access dates was turned off. Was it Vista? I
Mhm.
think it was Vista. And then so that was shut off. So then they were no longer updating. But then, you could turn it back on. That was maybe more common in corporate environments. But then we also became familiar with all the other things that would start triggering last access dates to be updated. And it was such minor things such as mousing over
Oh, yeah.
the files that it wasn't a true indicator of openings. So it really became hard to say, oh, this access date was updated on May 22nd. Clearly, they opened this file on May 22nd. We really can't do that anymore, but there are certainly better artifacts to indicate interactions with files that we
Yes.
can use today.
Yes.
So do you, off the top of your head, Becky, putting you on the spot, what do you think? What would you call out here?
I I mean, I would avoid I mean, I'll always avoid this situation, unless they're very descriptive, like you said, with the file system, the operating system, discussing last access dates, opening a file, how accurate and inaccurate can that be? I would start to, like you and I always talk about, match other artifacts to
Yep.
that evidence that would then solidify and not be as specific about a date, but more of a pattern when it comes to evidence.
Right. And so there's certainly a lot of stuff we could get out from like the registry,
Oh,
for example,
sure.
that will give us a lot of things, specifically the ntuser.dat for that user. And so we're talking things like the MRUs, the most recently used file, link files,
Exactly.
things like that would give you a lot more insight and accurate information.
Yeah, your jump list for sure.
Yep, jump lists, yep. I have not had to do anything with, like, the Windows timeline,
Mm.
artifacts yet. I forget the name of that database, but that could certainly have a wealth
Oh
of
gosh, yeah.
information.
Hmm.
I have not done anything at all, even on a personal level, with Copilot, like, I don't even have it turned on, but, from the rumblings, it's certainly very noisy, so if you could get that data, I'm sure that would give you
For
all
sure.
sorts of clues as to what the heck has been going on that computer.
Absolutely.
There's lots of things you can do to demonstrate interaction and use of files. And of course, sometimes these interactions and use of files is used to demonstrate knowledge of these things happening and purpose and intent and all of those things.
Oh
That's why
yeah,
we would kind of dive into it. It's just not for ha-has. Let's talk about all the last access dates on the computer. I
that's
mean,
right.
it's not that's not the reason. That should
Right.
not be the reason. We want to talk about the evidence strategically and have a point to why we're talking about it.
That's
We
right.
don't want to just drown you in data for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so in this situation, the testimony then moved on to internet browsers and how they actually store evidence. So then the examiner explained favorite icons, internet cache, and cookies, noting that cookies can provide clues about which websites were visited. They also covered email file types, meaning .emls and .emlx's, as well as Windows timeline activity and private recovery URLs. Now we are finally going to get into the testimony regarding the artifacts. The record showed that a Bing search was performed for the iNaturalist website on May 28, 2022, as spoken about before. This was
Mhm.
approximately 14 months before the lunch in question. The iNaturalist has several witnesses in the trial that explained it's a citizen science website where users can post the locations of different species, including in this case the sightings of death cap mushrooms. Additional web searches from the seized computer were also analyzed. A search artifact from Google Chrome, which was dated the same day, May the 28th, 2022, showed that an internet search had been conducted for Korumbura Middle Pub. That search occurred only a few minutes after the iNaturalist search. The records further indicated that additional Bing searches for the team iNaturalist later that evening were conducted. At that point, the reconstructed digital timeline for May 28, 2022 appeared as at 7:20 p.m., a Bing search for iNaturalist was performed. 7:21, the iNaturalist was visited. At 7:23, a search for Korumba Middle Pub was performed. More detailed browsing records showed visits to the iNaturalist website between 7:22 and 7:23 on that same date.
Now, one of the URLs specifically corresponded to an iNaturalist observation page showing a death cap mushroom sighting in Melbourne. And the title of that webpage was listed as Death Cap from Melbourne, Victoria, Australia on May 18, 2022 at 2:36 p.m. by, and there was the name of the iNaturalist user, and then it says Bricker Reserve or Robin and Naturalist. All these great terminologies in here. But during this portion of the testimony, the judge cautioned the jury not to attempt to search or verify any of these URLs on their own. And he told them, don't be tempted to put these URL searches into Google and conduct your own investigations. Nice warning. Glad he said it, right? Now, later on, the concept of focus was introduced into the digital evidence testimony. And after a series of detailed questions about the extracted computer data, forensic examiner Mr. Fox Henry explained that these focus records could show how long a device displayed or was focused on a particular web page. And so he gave the example of the iNaturalist front page, and he noted that the records indicated that it had been in focus for approximately 8 seconds before the user navigated to a different page. So here again, I want to talk more about this focus artifact. Now, there is a focus artifact that comes from the user assist registry key in the ntuser.dat. Again, lots of great information is being tracked in the registry about what those users are doing. And this artifact specifically is tracking how long something is in focus, as in when the app or the program that you're using is in the foreground. And when we say foreground, we mean the app that's on top of everything else. But what it's tracking is the total time for the app or the program. There's no like individual traces of like per session, like maybe there's 10 entries or something like that. No, it's just the app total time ever. But there's not an in-focus artifact for individual pages. Now, there is different in-focus artifacts for cell phones, but at this point, we're just talking about the web history on the computer, the Windows computer that was seized from Ms. Patterson's house. And so, what is he talking about when he's talking about this webpage being in focus for 8 seconds? What do we think he was actually using to come up with the 8 seconds here?
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think he is using that identifies those 8 seconds? Have you dealt with that before?
Well, we both have, Becky. Do you remember the Casey Anthony case?
Of course. Yes.
That Casey Anthony was the first thing that popped into my mind when they started talking about, oh, she was on the webpage for 8 seconds, because this was some of the stuff that John Bradley ended up reading into, is like she was on this site, and then, he was going in trying to determine, if it was actually a website being visited or was ads running in the background on the page and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it based on the specific URLs, there was at least 4 web pages visited within 3 minutes, if not more. So normally when they're trying to bring this sort of evidence in, they're trying to say they were on this website for a really long time. So surely they must have been reading it and studying it and gaining information. But the one record, it was like, oh, she was on it for 8 seconds. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, she went to this pub website. I don't know why they keep bringing it up, because they keep bringing it up throughout the trial, and the fact that she bought food there and had it delivered and blah, blah,
Right.
blah. I never saw how it played a key role in anything that went on with the death cap mushrooms, but it's in there, and
Sure.
they keep talking about it. So the only thing I can think of is he's just going through the browser history and using the times. This page hit at this time,
Right.
this page hit at this time. This was 8 seconds, 30 seconds, that's the only
Basically,
thing I can think of.
basically showing a user's interaction with the computer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at with this. That's where it was coming from.
Right. Yeah. So the day concludes with some discussion on Gail's Samsung phone, mainly text messages between her and Erin.
Gail was I believe she was the aunt. Oh my goodness, I forgot. Well, she was one of the poor ladies invited to the lunch that ended up dying from the beef Wellingtons.
Yeah.
Very sad case. But on this note, I think this is going to be a good place to stop from this week's episode. So, I mean, we've been here talking for a while. Remember, the trial's 9 weeks long, and we've only really now just started getting into the actual digital evidence. And like, we put the cell phone tower records in here, but that's like a little bit of a different digital evidence, because
Right.
we're not extracting it from the devices that is being provided from the cell phone provider, the service provider.
Sure.
But it's still kind of in our wheelhouse, but it's a special, unique thing. But now we're really getting into like what's on the devices that people have in their hot little hands.
Yeah. And so with that, we'll dig into those devices and get more details out to you. But until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and as always, keep parsing the truth one bite at a time.
Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacey Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths. These badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacey's obsession, this podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.